What makes the Tamron 17-50 one of the best travel lenses is the really wide focal range going from 17 all the way to 50, really good autofocus performance, it's really small and lightweight, and it comes in budget friendly at under $700. But while I do think this is one of the best travel lenses, there are a couple of things you need to be aware of before you consider it. Now in full disclosure, Tamron did send this lens to me to test and review, but no money changed hands, and they don't get to see or have any input into this video before it's launched. Now with any lens, the first thing we need to talk about is image quality. And to test the image quality, I used this lens exclusively for everything I filmed over the last 2 months. That included some work filming heli skiing, some dog sledding, out to glaciers, a trip way north past the Arctic Circle, and pretty much everything else I've done in the last few months just to test this lens. Now starting with image quality, in photos it's easiest to show both the strengths and some of the weaknesses of this lens. The photos that come out are great. I shot pretty much everything with the A1, I did use the A7C Mark II a few times, and I used the A6700 a few times, because I was also testing those cameras out. Getting into image quality, this lens is decently sharp and it performs well throughout the focal range. There are a couple of caveats that wide open at f4 from 17 to 20 you have some vignetting. Fairly easy to correct in Lightroom, a little bit more difficult to deal with in video. If you want to get rid of the vignetting, you need to stop down to about f5.6 or higher, and then it really cleans up the image nicely and everything sharpens up nicely. Now this is not as sharp as a G Master lens, but it shouldn't be. It's really aimed at being a great budget lens, and coming in at $699, it really does fit that bill. This lens performs fantastically well for a budget lens, and I have no reservations about recommending it for anybody wanting to do video and photo work, and especially for having kind of an all-in-one lens that you can shoot a huge variety of stuff with, which is what I've been doing. The autofocus works exceptionally fast because it's equipped with Tamron's VXD linear motors, which means it responds really fast depending on how you have your camera set up, and locks autofocus really well. So for photos, even with cameras up to 50 megapixels like the A1, this lens resolves the photos very well. There's plenty of detail, it's plenty sharp, and it can give you some really beautiful images. But I also work a lot with video, and especially when I'm working around helicopters, I don't have the opportunity to change lenses. So taking this with me heli skiing meant this was the only lens I was going to use. And for heli skiing, it worked well for both video and photo. There was one thing I wish I had had, which was a little bit extra lens base stabilization, not just the in-body stabilization of the A1, but the lens still performs really well. And when you have active stabilization on, it takes care of pretty much most everything. And I found that all the video clips I shot were plenty smooth enough to be able to use in post. So for both video and photo work, this lens is fantastic. And because it's 17 to 50, you get these fantastic wide images, which work great for landscapes or great for showing off larger spaces. But you can also punch into 50, which works well for portraits, or being able to punch in on details, or even just punch in a little bit more on a landscape. And if you combine it with something like the 50 to 400, you now have 17 all the way to 400 millimeters in 2 lenses, which makes this great for travel. So if you're wondering what makes having a 17 all the way to 400 in 2 lenses so cool, check this out. You see the mountain peak back here? 17. 50. 400. Now yes, I realize that for low light this is going to suffer a little bit, but how often do you really film in extremely low light? And most Sony cameras now work really well at pretty high ISOs, and if you're working with a lot of newer Sony cameras, many of them have a second base ISO at 1600 or 4000, which gives you pretty good low light performance anyway. And if you're working with something like the A7S III, which has a second base ISO of 12800, then you're really good in very, very low light, even with an f4. But having that much zoom range in a 2-lens combo makes this an exceptionally good setup for travel photographers and videographers. Now the lens is lightweight, it comes in at under 500 grams, which makes it a great one for running around, traveling a lot, because it keeps your weight down. It is made out of this sort of plastic material, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but all the Tamron lenses I've had for the last few years have held up well. It has the USB-C port, which means you can plug it into Tamron's lens utility and program how you want the lens to respond. You can have a linear focus ring or non-linear. You can have it respond quickly, how much focus or how short a focus you want. You can program the custom button here, which means you get a lot of customizability with this lens. It also has a good weather sealing on the back. And I will say that even though this is an internal zooming lens, which makes it great for gimbal work, the front element does move in and out. So that could be a concern if you work in very dirty environments. But for me, in all the lenses I've had from Tamron, I've not had a big issue with dust getting inside of the lens, even when they've been zooming like this with the 17 to 28. So I'm not too worried about that. It is well weather sealed and will handle a fair amount of abuse in that area. For me, this particular lens feels great. It's really well balanced on my A1 body or the A7S III or anything else I've used to film with. And I really like how easy and quick it is to go from 17 to 50 and punch in with just about a quarter turn to go all the way in. Now the lens does have a 67mm filter thread, which I like the fact that Tamron's putting 67mm filter threads on pretty much all of their lenses except for 2, I believe. That is fantastic because any filters you get for any of the lenses, if you own the other Tamron lenses, you can make them fit. And of course you could use step-up rings and stuff like that too. Now I said that there were a couple of caveats, and there are. I do wish that there was a version of this that was f2.8. Now that would make it more expensive and probably considerably larger and heavier, so I totally understand why they stuck with f4. And f4 with most Sony bodies that have pretty good high ISO performance should be fine. But if you're gonna do a lot of filming in low light, then you may wanna consider something like the 20 to 40 instead, which is a fixed f2.8, or the 17 to 28, which is also a fixed f2.8 throughout the zoom range. That being said, everything you've seen so far in this video was filmed with this lens, and it performs well with a body that works well at higher ISO in low light. The other caveat is that it does have some pretty good vignetting. Now I touched on it earlier. It's fairly easy to clean up in Lightroom from 17 to 20. Once you get past 20, it cleans up pretty well on its own, but that is something to be aware of. So if you do a lot of photo work, it's pretty easy to fix. And as soon as the profiles in Lightroom have been updated, I'm sure it'll be fixed automatically. But again, this is not aimed at high-end photographers. This is a fantastic lens for anybody starting out who wants to get away from a kit lens and get into something that's higher quality, but still save a fair amount of money and keep it on a budget. For me, because this lens has been so much smaller and so much lighter weight than say my 24 to 105, and because it gives you that extra width, which works great in tight environments, I've really enjoyed shooting with this lens. And yeah, it has kind of become my favorite lens of choice for run and gun stuff because it just offers so much versatility in such a small and easy to use lightweight package. Now, as always, there are links in the description that are affiliate links that help support this channel and help me do what I do. And if you got any value out of this video, or if you just enjoyed it, then consider subscribing. In the meantime, you're gonna wanna watch this video here, which goes through pretty much every lens Tamron's made for Sony. Some of them are really great and fantastic. I'll see you over there. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below, or you can join my live stream, which happens most Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.